And what's a cell body? It's also known as the soma, means cell body, contains relatively large round nucleus with a prominent nucleolus. So this is the cell body and it's containing the nucleolus with nacelle bodies. And the perikaryon is a cytoplasm surrounding the nucleus. Either it's a sensory neuron or motor neuron. This is the basic unit of the cell. Why you have to learn all these basic things is when we come to the subject proper, then we are not going to repeat all these things. So you please learn what are the basic terminologies, especially we are going to use in the autonomic nervous system. And cytoskeleton is containing neurofilaments. Here the neurofilaments and bundles and neurotubules. Once again the same thing. Whereas the bundles of the neurofilaments are called as the neurofibrils. So bundles of neurofilaments is called as the neurofibrils, extend into the dendrites and axon. So here usually one dendrite is connected with the dendrite of another neuron. The perikaryon has a rough, grainy appearance because of the numerous, it is containing the mitochondria, free and fixed ribosomes, rough endoplasmic reticulum. And these organelles help to supply energy and produce organic material, especially the neurotransmitters. So, neurotransmitters. Some areas of this perikaryon contain the cluster of rough endoplasmic reticulum and free ribosomes. And these regions each stained darkly are called as the nacelle bodies, because these are named after the German microscopist, that's the Franz Nissl. And nacelle bodies account for the grey color of the areas containing the neuron cell bodies. That's why we are calling it as the grey matter, especially in the brain. And it is what we commonly as the grey matter, especially in the brain. And neurons lack centrioles. The neurons do not have the centrioles. They are the amniotic, means cannot divide. The brain, neuron cells cannot divide and cannot be replaced if lost to injury, disease or. So please, this is very important, because once the neuron cells are damaged, it cannot be regenerated, because this is a special type of the cell, whereas the cells of the skin and other organs, they are being replaced by a new cell. And the neural stem cells do persist in the adult nervous system. However, they are typically inactive except in the nose, that's the olfactory receptors, and hippocampus region of the brain, part of the brain involved in memory storage, hippocampus. So what are dendrites? Now we have learned axon. It's the elongated portion of a neuron cell body, whereas the dendrites are variable number of slender sensitive process that extend out of the cell body. Here you can find these dendritic spines, and each branches bear fine process called as the dendritic spine. So these are all the dendritic spine, and this is the dendrite. So this structure is a dendrite. Of course, this is elongated and connected with that of the axon, neuron. And in the central nervous system, the neuron receives information from other neurons, primarily at the dendrite spines. The dendrite spines represent 80 to 90% of the neuron's total surface, especially the dendrite spines. So these branches do contain 80 to 90% of the neuron's total surface area. Axon, as usual, long cytoplasmic extension capable of transmitting an electric impulse, known as the action potential. So this is the axon. Here you can see the axon. The pink colored one is it's a axon, and axolemma is the membrane around the axon. So surrounding this axon, axolemma is there. Exoplasm is the cytoplasm of the axon. So in between this thing, the cytoplasm is there, and that's known as the exoplasm. So exoplasm contains once again the neurofibrils, neurotubules, small vesicles, lysosomes, and mitochondria. And the exolemma may be exposed to interstitial fluid process of neuroglia. And here, the base of the axon is a thickened region known as the axon hillock. It is a region known as the axon hillock here, and this is the region, the axon hillock. And axon may be branched, producing side branches known as the collaterals. So it is also axon may branch, and this axon play the side branches known as the collateral nerves. So once again here you can very easily find the dendrites, the cell body. This one is the cell body, this one is the nucleus, and this is the axon hillock. Of course, this is the myelin sheath, and this is the synapse. In between two neurons, one and another is connected with the dendritic spines, and this is the synapse. So this is the postsynaptic cell. So whenever we are referring the postsynaptic like that, you have to memorize this picture particularly. The signal transduction is unidirectional usually. This is traversing from this to this cell. The main axon and any collaterals and in series of the fine extension called as the telodendria, and the telodendria these are the telodendria before the synapse occurs between the effector cell, that is known as the telodendria. Then the synaptic terminals, these are all the synaptic terminals, end part of the neuron which is having the junction with postsynaptic cell is known as the synaptic terminals. So synapse, each synaptic terminal is a part of the synapse. Synapse means the junction of two neurons, the specialized site where the neuron communicates with another cell, and two cells meet at every synapse we have seen. And presynaptic cell has the synaptic terminal and sends a message, and generally it's a neuron. Whereas the postsynaptic cell also receives the message and can be a neuron or other type of the cell. So this is the microscopic electron microscopic photography of the nervous system. Here you can see that this type of the neurons is the postsynaptic neuron, and synaptic terminal of the what you call as the presynaptic neurons. So it's the size of this thing is 5 micrometers. And communication between the cells at a synapse commonly involves the release of the neurotransmitters from the synaptic knob. So synaptic knob and neurotransmitters are the chemicals. We will see what are the neurotransmitters in future slides. Especially the neurotransmitters are typically packaged in synaptic vesicles. So this is a synapse, presynaptic cell. So this is a postsynaptic cell. Of course, this is this you have seen. There are varieties of the axon and dendrite, and each cell is connected through the exoaxonic or dendrodendritic junction. And this is a presynaptic cell, and it is containing the vesicles, synaptic vesicles, and inside the synaptic vesicles, the neurotransmitters are packaged. Usually, this is located. Whereas the blood vessels is also there to supply to that particular neuron itself. Whereas the glial cells are also part of the neurons, and this is known as the synaptic cleft. This space. When one neuron communicates with another neuron, the synapse of the receiving cell can be on a dendrite. So one cell will be neuron will be connected with the another neuron with a dendrite, and on the cell body and also along the length of the axon. Anywhere it can be connected. And one synapse we already discussed is the neuromuscular junction, especially NM junction, neuromuscular junction. So at neuroglandular junction, a neuron regulates the activity of the secretion of a gland, because it is going to contract or relax the muscles smooth muscles of a gland. Glands are constituted of the smooth muscles, whereas the skeletal muscles are attached to the bone. And axon, as usual, it is containing many structures, especially the synaptic knob, which is elongated here. So the structure of the synaptic terminal varies with the types of the postsynaptic cell. So this is a axon and it's going to join with the effector cell, and this is a telodendron, and this is the synaptic knob. This is the synaptic knob and mitochondria. Of course, these small granulated like tissues are known as the synaptic vesicle. Of course, it is containing all the parts of the cell like EPR and ribosomes, etc. And presynaptic membrane. This is the presynaptic membrane, whereas this is the postsynaptic membrane. So these postsynapse may be directly a effector cell like the smooth muscles or skeletal muscles, or it may be another neuron also. So here, this is the synaptic cleft and the neurotransmitter are secreted here in this particular junction. What is a synaptic cleft? Synaptic cleft is a space between which separates the presynaptic membrane, especially the neurotransmitters are released. This is the synaptic cleft, the gap or junction between two neurons or a neuron and a effector cell. It is known as the synaptic cleft, this space. And postsynaptic membrane, this is the postsynaptic membrane, has receptors for the neurotransmitters. So as I already told, the postsynaptic membrane may be of a effector cell like the skeletal muscles, the smooth muscles, or a gland, whereas the synaptic cleft do contain the secreted, what you call as neurotransmitter. So that's the structure. Here you can see that extracellular fluid and axon is there, whereas the exostosis of the neurotransmitter occurs whenever it is required. And exoplasmic transport, each synaptic knob contains the mitochondria and all the required organelles of the cell, and breakdown products of the neurotransmitters released at the synapse are reabsorbed and reassembled at the synaptic knob. So these, whenever the acetylcholine is secreted in the cholinergic nervous system, then it is broken down to acetic acid and choline, whereas the choline is reabsorbed into the synaptic knob. Synaptic knob also receives a continuous supply of neurotransmitters that are being produced in the cell body. So it's a storehouse of the neurotransmitters. And neurotransmitters from the cell body travel the length of the axon along the neurotubules. Already we see neurotubules. The movement of the materials between the cell body and synaptic knobs is called as the exoplasmic transport. The movement of the material between the cell body and synaptic knobs. So this is known as the exoplasmic transport. So this exoplasmic transport occurs in both directions: anterograde flow of the material from the cell body to the synaptic bulb, and retrograde flow of the materials from the synaptic bulb to the cell body. Both are existing here. If debris or unusual chemicals arrive at the synaptic knob, retrograde flow delivers them to the cell body. So the arriving material may alter the activity of the cell body by turning genes off or on. And the rabies and toxic heavy metals are examples of the related to the retrograde flow. So usually the rabies virus travels through the nerve tissue. So it is the retrograde, means from the below one to the above one. That's known as the retrograde transmission. And the classifications of the neurons is by their functions. There are four groups, important groups of course, based on the structure are anaxonic, bipolar and unipolar and multipolar. Anaxonic, bipolar, unipolar and multipolar neurons. So what's an axonic? Is a small structure and all cell processes look alike. All cell processes look alike, have no anatomical features that distinguish axons from the dendrite. There are no axons or there is no specific dendrite. All are looking similar here. It is located in the brain and special sense organs, especially the smell and other organs. Function is poorly understood. Of course, it is present in the higher centers of the brain. Function is poorly understood. And bipolar axons have two distinct processes. Here you can see one dendritic process and one axon process. One is dendritic process and one is the axon process. Cell bodies between the two processes, it's a more rare, occurs in very special sense organs, whereas they release sight, smell or hearing information to the other neurons. This is the particular function of this bipolar neurons. So unipolar neuron is dendrites and axons are continuous here. The dendrites and the axons are continuous. Cell body lies of the side. Here the cell body lies of the side. Initial segment is the dendritic process. The initial segment is dendritic process and rest is the axon which carries axon potentials. Most sensory neurons of the peripheral nervous system are unipolar in nature. Their axons extend more than a meter in some cases, ending at synapses in the central nervous system. Longest are those carrying sensations from the tips of the toes to the spinal cord. So if you have certain what you call as the pain in the tip of the toe, that need to be reached to the central nervous system for process and give a command to the motor muscles, especially the skeletal muscle, to withdraw your feet. So that is a longest nerve. And multipolar means it have two or more dendrites. Multipolar do have two or more dendrites here and a single axon. This is a single axon. And most common type of the neuron in the central nervous system is this very typical type of the neuron. All the motor neurons that control skeletal muscles are the multipolar neurons. So now you have to understand the structure very simply. This is the cell body and the nucleus. Then it is the elongated portion of this neuron is axon and synaptic terminals. This is the very simple thing how you can remember this particular neuron structure. And axons of multipolar neurons can be as long as those of the unipolar neurons. And the longest axons of the multipolar neurons carry motor commands to small muscles that move to the toes. So from toes to the central nervous system, the nerves are elongated. Of course, a single nerve will travel from the toes to the central nervous system. And functional classification of the neuron, as usual, sensory, motor and interneurons. So this is the simplest classification of the neurons. One is the sensory, another one is the motor and interneurons. So here you can see in this particular this thing, and this is the spinal cord cross section. And this is known as the dorsal sulcus, or it's also known as the fissure, whereas this one is the ventral sulcus. So if you take out the spinal cord and cut like this, then the cross section will look like this. And this one is the white matter, whereas the another thing through which the nerves arise is the gray matter, whereas the central canal contains the cerebrospinal fluid. Here in this particular space, the CSF is accumulated, and this one is the interneuron in between the what you call as the sensory and motor fibers. Or sensory is afferent fiber, the motor is efferent fiber. So the receptors, through the receptors, sensory fibers do receive the what do you call it, the stimulus which travels through the dorsal root ganglia and being processed in the interneuron, whereas the motor sign or the motor signal will be sent to the motor fibers.